got out of rehab at 31. It wasn't until I was turning 40 that I had another bottom where I had to reckon with my lifestyle choices, with diet and movement, et cetera, because I'd put on 50 pounds and was just pursuing this corporate life to the point of illness, honestly. Like I was, although I'd been this athlete, I just could barely make it up a simple flight of stairs without being winded, tightness in my chest, heart disease runs in my family, and just had a second situation in which I realized I needed to overhaul my life. So there was a whole 10-year period in between those kind of moments of awakening.
That 10-year period is a 10-year period that a lot of people listening to this right now can relate to, where you found yourself in a professional context or professional endeavor without asking yourself the question of like, who am I and what am I actually interested in? And you might be doing it because your mum wants you to be a doctor,
sure,
or you have Indian parents and they came over here and they want you to be a lawyer, whatever it might be. I hear that story a lot. What is the question people in that situation should be asking themselves? And how do they take that first step in transformation from becoming the banker that's in the city with a suit and tie on right now listening to this, to the person that like would make them whole and full and love themselves in their life? Like, what is the first step? Is it a question? Is it a retreat they need to go on?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that question is probably different for everybody, but how about just asking yourself, who are you? And I mean that in the broadest sense, perhaps the most unanswerable spiritual sense, but I also mean it in the very tangible sense of like, what are you doing? Are you really on the path that you want to be on? Did you choose this path? Are you here because of external pressures or expectations that you didn't ask for? And I think when you turn inward and start exploring your interior to try to grapple with what is making you tick, what is impulsing the decisions that you're making, the big decisions and the small decisions, and developing a lattice work or an understanding of what those mechanics are, sets you on a trajectory to making better decisions for yourself. So it's not like maybe that banker is supposed to be a banker, maybe super happy. That's fine. I'm not here to tell people they should quit their jobs. I'm just saying that an examined life, meaning that inward glance into understanding why you're making the decisions that you're making, historically, the way in which you were raised that might have set you up to make decisions you think you're making for yourself, but are actually in reaction to unconscious, kind of triggers that are built into you. I think developing an awareness of that is really important in trying to understand that question. And it took me a very long time to untangle that knot. I don't think it's a simple process. I think it's different for everybody. It can come in the form of talking to a therapist or meditation. There is no one modality for that. But I think simply the commitment to try to understand that, I think, is the process of gaining that understanding to help you make more intentional decisions for yourself. And maybe it starts with an easy prompt like, what did you enjoy doing when you were 8 years old that you don't do anymore? And why don't you do it anymore? Re-engaging with, the childlike nature that is perhaps lost as we grow older and kind of get into the flow of our professional lives.
One of the most important questions I think I would add as well is, how do you feel? We very rarely ask ourselves that. And I think we all have this sort of internal compass, which we've been given by life, which is like, how do you feel in this situation? How do you truly feel? Not like, how do you feel in the context of, is your mother happy or is your father happy or is society impressed by you? But like, how do you actually feel? And I think that sometimes for me has sat apart from the accomplishment. So I could be achieving something great and know that people are impressed and happy, but really I'm going through a fucking shit time internally.
Right.
And I'm tuning into that voice of like, how do I feel? And tuning out of the like, how do people feel about me?
Right.
Has really helped me in those moments where I've got to make a big decision to quit. And I don't think people ask themselves that question enough.
Well, they may ask themselves that question, but the answer is flippant, right? It's like, I'm good. Cool. I feel good. I slept good last night. No, like, how do you really feel? And then continuing to peel back the layers until it gets really uncomfortable. And then, you're in the sweet spot, right? That's where the juice is.
I've peeled them back. And I've done, I've raised my awareness. I realize I'm in the wrong place, but I'm 39 years old and I've got kids. I've got a house. We live in this part of London so I can get to work quickly. We've built our lives around this, person I thought I wanted to be. And I'm held in place by my friendship group and my mum lives down. People have that fear. They think, how do I break out of that? How do I shed?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first I would say to that person, congratulations. Like, you created a life for yourself. Like, on some level, even if you want to leave that career path or you're unfulfilled in that, you still are somebody who is deserving of acknowledgement for building something. And, that's an amazing thing. So it's not about casting that aside or disrespecting it. For me, I would say to that person, what is it that gets you excited? Like, what is it that you feel is unnourished in your life? Do you have a creative itch? Is there something calling you, or something, again, that you used to do as a kid that you really enjoyed, and for some reason, unbeknownst to you, you don't do it anymore? Maybe it's
music.
Like, yeah, it could be music or stand up, or you play football, right? Like being on a football team or doing something, just having coffee with your friend or what have you. Finding a way to build that back into your life in a way that isn't going to derail your current life. But I think just breathing on that, like giving space to the things that bring you joy in the most primal sense, like the simplest things that just you remember made you happy, that you've forgotten, and recapturing that and finding a way to respect that, protect it, nourish it, and inject it into your life. And I think the more that you kind of tend to that garden, suddenly, a little opportunity over here pops up, or something is telling me I should move this way. These are very subtle energies that you have to be present for in order to notice them when they appear. But I think those are the subtle energies. Those are the waves you want to be surfing. And you can do that while you're working at the bank. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. And over time, maybe you start moving a little over this way. 5 years later, your life is unrecognizable. And I think this goes to the impatience that we all have. We all want to be this idealized version of ourselves, happier, fitter, thinner, richer, whatever it is, overnight. And we overestimate what we can accomplish in a year, or maybe in a couple years, and completely underestimate what we could do in a decade. We're not wired to think in decades. It seems too intangible. But if all you do is make tiny little changes to build in habits into your life that bring you joy or fulfillment or happiness or purpose in incremental micro allotments that don't disrupt the rest of your life, you do that for 10 years straight, your life is going to be different. And I can promise you that.
10 years after rehab, you have what you describe as your second rock bottom. You're a workaholic. You're trying to sort of appease the perception of people in your life to make them proud, I guess. Just before your 40th birthday, this is when that sort of reckoning in your life takes place. What is that reckoning in your life? What did you realize, and what did you see as the solution to that confrontation?
Yeah, so I had spent the better part of 10 years people pleasing and doing my best to be successful, living somebody else's life, unbeknownst to me, doing all the right things, checking all the boxes, becoming successful. So if you were on the outside looking in, it looked like I was doing pretty well. Inside, I was dying because my soul, my spirit was unheard and undernourished. Like, I didn't know how to pay attention to myself or the signals of my soul who were telling me, I don't think you're that happy doing this. And repressing that year after year after year to the point where I couldn't do it anymore. So I was harboring a bit of an existential crisis about how I was living my life, being this lawyer and kind of showing up in the world in a certain way that always felt like a costume that didn't fit me. Meanwhile, although sober from drugs and alcohol, I sort of transferred a lot of that addiction energy into food, and was eating, a terrible fast food diet, gained a lot of weight, was inactive, even though I'd been a swimmer in college, wasn't really moving my body in any meaningful way for a number of years. This existential crisis that I was having collided with this health scare shortly before I turned 40, where I was going up a flight of stairs after a long day at work and couldn't even make it all the way up. Had to stop halfway up the flight, winded, out of breath, tightness in my chest, like wheezing, thinking, I swam at Stanford. Like, I was a world ranked swimmer. I'm like 39, about to turn 40. I feel like shit. I'm fat. And it just broke that spell of denial about how I was living, where it became intolerable to continue along that path. And it was very much like the day that I decided to go to rehab, like this moment back to willingness. Like, suddenly out of the blue, I was blessed with this realization, not only that I needed to change my lifestyle habits, but that I had the willingness to actually take action on that. And because the decision that I had made 10 years prior when I went to rehab had been so transformational, like, I could have woken up that day and made a different decision. What would my life look like? And I had this palpable sense that, once again, this was just such a moment where if I could make a decision like I had 10 years ago, maybe I could change the trajectory of my life. And I know that these moments are fleeting and they require kind of immediate action, or they pass, right? You could say, maybe I should eat better or go to the gym once in a while. Like, I'm tired of feeling like shit. That's so vague. I knew that that wasn't going to work for me, and I needed to do something immediate that was also difficult, that would mimic the experience of going into a treatment center for drugs and alcohol. Like, I needed to have a structured situation that would snap me out of my comfort zone and kind of create a new trajectory upon which I could build something different.
I think about this a lot in like businesses and organizations. They almost need to stage a crisis, I call it, to make change happen. Because when you're in an organization and there's maybe thousands of people, and let's say it's AI or an innovation comes along, people will go, yeah, it's a problem, but it's fine. And then they'll kind of carry on, keep on keeping on. The organization almost needs to stage a crisis, like get everyone in a room and say, we're changing today, and really sort of terrify their team about the prospect of not changing. It's almost like staging a rock bottom, because it will be the frog in the frying pan. It will slowly creep upon you if you don't,
right,
at some point, as I call it, like stage a crisis, which is to really get clear on where this is heading and where we're sleepwalking ourselves into, whether it's with our health, our relationships. I actually had this conversation with a friend of mine in his relationship, because he's now in a sexless relationship and he's really unhappy, but he's not saying anything about it. He's kind of bringing it up sort of quietly once in a while, and his unhappiness in the relationship and resentment is coming out in other ways in the relationship, like arguments and fighting, where he needs to stop and like stage a crisis, like not allow it to be brushed under the carpet anymore, and sit down and say, listen, if we can't solve this, I have to leave this relationship, and like, I want to solve it with you, but it's a deal breaker for me. See what I mean?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Basically, short of like sleepwalking yourself towards the cliff's edge, staging an intervention on your life by, like concocting a crisis that's going to compel you to confront the elephant in the room that is the thing that is holding you back. That's obvious to everyone else, and yet you're refusing to look at it.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.